My name is Dumiso. I am from Botswana, and I am the coordinator for Success Capital NGO, and young queer LGBTIQ-led serving and managed organization. Having attended the 29 April non-state actors consultation on GAP, and having had a lot of conversations subsequently at a domestic level, I think it has been quite clear in that a lot of narratives that are being said are really quite the same in terms of the lack of resources and a lot of people not necessarily having an understanding of the concept of GAP, as well as a difficulty in terms of trying to create synergies. There's so much work and data that is being created, and there's so many different working streams in terms of different health initiatives, and the reality is that people are speaking at and not necessarily to each other, and that there is a very clear need in that, in the same way that the need and urgency for business as usual to shift and change gears, there's a clear gap with the exclusion of young people, and actually providing, I think, effective tools for enabling a shift in some of the conversations, in ensuring that some of the dynamics in terms of the power structures that exist in health technical working groups and structures today can actually allow for business as usual to actually change. So I think for me, it's really about how do we then shift the conversation to a very different level where it's not necessarily just about resources, but about ways of work, about practices and policies that can ensure that there's some form of tangible action, not necessarily at a certain point in September, but now already.
Great, thanks to be so lots there. Gap in the gap. I'm going to stop with gap in the gap, but no, I mean it is much more than resources. It is change of behaviour. It's how one talks. It how one includes and what's the action. So I think it's highly synergistic with what Stefan said, which is demand at the local level and localizing a lot of this. But if there's a challenge in the narratives not changing and it's still not communicated effectively, I think we need to hear that because we need to respond to that. Teresa, I've got one more and then I'm going to hand over to Werner.
Oh, excellent question. Let me start by also acknowledging the importance of youth and really bringing that into the plan. We received a number of suggestions also in this regard, and we're working on this. Also, there's broad agreement that this is not a policy creating mechanism, but it's really a mechanism to help countries implement agreed policies at country level. And it's about operational collaboration to support the implementation of these policies. I think that also answers partially to the question from the delegate of Russia on really this country ownership and country leadership. The programs which will be implemented or the actions which will be taken will be actions agreed at country level with the country. So it will be, in a way, it will be support to nationally chosen priorities and implementing the programs there. And I think I briefly mentioned that there's wide recognition. Each of the agencies have their strategies which have been adopted by their respective governing boards. And of course, all the agencies have slightly different sort of governing structures. And this global action plan is not meant to supersede, but rather to spell out how collaboration in implementing these strategies, how collaboration between the agencies will happen to really enhance the impact of working jointly. And that's very much in line with the efforts of UN reform to provide more coherent support to member states in driving the SDG agenda. There have been also a number of briefings in Geneva for missions there, and missions have been invited. At the World Health Assembly, we had a technical briefing, which is one of the formal events where updates are being provided, with many ministers engaging into the discussion. But otherwise, it's very much also the countries where country dialogues happened, is countries which expressed an interest to have this kind of conversation in country. So it's not something sort of being imposed on a country, but it's also there in response to demand.
From our experience, while we haven't had a sort of formal decision-making segment on the Global Action Plan, it's been presented to our board on, at least on 2 occasions now as part of Executive Director reports to the board, and by and large we've received strong endorsement for participation. Now, in terms of where we get to in implementation, I mean, I think the principles that we've heard about are closely aligned with the principles of the organisation that we've set. So, I mean, the short answer is it's been discussed, and we've heard some views from members of our board. Thanks.
Thank you. And I just wanted to go back to, I think, what is one of the original purposes of this briefing is for us to hear from you on how we can tailor and finalize the plan. So just to say thank you very much for all the feedback, and we've taken note, and I know that there's been a lot of feedback on Accelerator 4, which we are paying close attention to. I think the intention very much is about helping member states. So it's not about going beyond or generating new commitments, but it's about within the framework of the 2030 agenda, the SDGs, which all member states have signed up to. How can we help member states through coordinated collaborative action across the 12 global health organizations to deliver on these commitments? And I think in some places it is going to be helping member states to identify and deal with let's call them unhealthy contradictions. So on the one hand, committing to health and well-being, and on the other hand, increasing fossil fuel subsidies. I'll just go back to that example. On the one hand, committing to gender equality, and on the other hand, criminalizing LGBTI people and denying them access to health services. On the one hand, committing to making commitments to health and well-being, but on the other hand, not investing in creating awareness on healthy diets and healthy food, and investing in prevention of NCDs. So it's all within the framework of the 2030 agenda, and I think we very much want to, based on what member states are requesting from us at the country level, help them to achieve health and well-being, and also deliver at the same time on other health-related targets. But very much at the request, as I think Hendrik pointed out, at the demands made by member states through country dialogue processes, that we would come together based on our mandates, and it's going to be different. UNDP is very different from WHO, is very different from UNITAID, is very different from UN Women, so it'll depend on what constellation of actors is there, what the demand is, and all within what a member state's existing policy, regulatory, legal framework is, and what the request is. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
I want to thank our co-hosts, the speakers, the moderators, and all of you for your contributions. We hope that this event has helped to clarify what the Global Action Plan is and will be. A commitment of 12 organizations to better support countries to accelerate progress toward health-related SDGs by collaborating more closely. A plan whose main value will be at country level through actions in response to country demand. A plan focused on supporting countries to implement approved policies and strengthen their capacity. A tool to help countries deliver on their political commitments toward UHC, and really not much more than a beginning. It is an example of how we can work more closely together as we move into the decade of delivery. The implementation of the plan will start after the launch in September through continued dialogue and tailored action at country level. Let us work together to ensure an ambitious outcome of the UHC high-level meeting. And let us work together to ensure that the centrality of health as a precondition, a driver, and an outcome to sustainable development will be appropriately reflected during the SDG Summit. Thank you.